Josh and Frankie. What a couple of dumb shits. Hello, primates! You found Primus Tracks. Congratulations! This is not the only place to find the wonderful world of Primus Tracks. We're also at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Threads. There is a Facebook page appropriately called Primus Tracks, and that page is maintained by none other than the resident of the 39th floor Primus Tracks Towers in Mexico City. It is Frankie Berestein. I think I saw some kind of inflatable or dirigible go by the window there. Was
Yes.
it a balloon?
Very appropriate for today's track.
Okay, I'm just making sure. I didn't know if this was some kind of weird marketing ploy or if it had to do with our episode today. We are talking about track 5 from the Grand Pecking Order, which is an album by a group known as Oysterhead. The track we are discussing today is called Radon Balloon. I remember from some of my chemistry courses that radon is a noble gas, which means it doesn't necessarily bond with other elements. And the other thing I remember is it's radioactive and it's a very dense element. So I don't know how a radon balloon is actually, it's like 8 times denser than the atmosphere. So I don't know how it's going to actually take flight. So this might be, when you are walking around and you see balloons on the ground looking really sad, even though there's still air in them, this might be one of those. I don't know. We do have some business to take care of. Of course, you can support the podcast in many ways. The easiest way is to spread the word to your Primus loving pals. You could also let the ads at the end of the episode just roll. Turn the volume down. I don't care. You can also, if you're interested, hit us up on Instagram for some stickers designed by Frankie and printed by our pals at Sticker Robot.
And if you paste them anywhere, send us a photo.
Oh, of course.
We would love to share it.
Always forget to mention that. And for more Josh and Frankie than you can shake a stick at, go to patreon.com/Primus Tracks. We have, for the first time in a while, Frankie, I haven't really checked, first time in a while, we have an entrant into the Punch Bowl. That's another way you can support the podcast.
Fantastic.
And that is achieved by going to Apple Podcasts and leaving a 5-star review for this very podcast. We'll read it right here, even if you say things that are hurtful about me and nice about Frankie. This one, Frankie, is from, the spelling is Lien 1975. So is that Lion 1975? Leon 1975?
I guess so.
I'll tell you one thing, Frankie. I'd be lying if I said I like the 1975. However, this review says, great cast, guys. Primus has such a unique and interesting backstory that you guys cover in spades. Oh, they added a nugget about the 2023, the only show Primus played in 2023, which was the benefit show for Jimmy Hayward. And this person was there.
Cool.
And they say the cover of Whole Lotta Rosie is the highlight for me. And I was hoping you could cover that performance in a future episode. Ooh, interesting.
We definitely will. If I could just share some quick thoughts about that show. First of all, it must have been incredible to be there. Judging by the videos that I've watched online, it was a stellar show. Of course, for a really, really big and great cause.
Yep.
But in terms of the musicianship that unfolded that night, it's fascinating to see Les trying to navigate his way around the song without an instrument in his hands, right?
That's right.
And of course, it's amazing to see them tackle a full Tool track on stage, because we had gotten a tease here and there, but the full song, that's incredible. Justin is an incredible musician. So is Danny Carey. But I mean, I'm not impartial. Maybe I'm not the best person to judge, but for me, Tim Alexander completely owned that drum battle. Yeah, he was absolutely out of this world. And it made me nostalgic to see that drum battle, because it reminded me of the nightly drum solos from the Fromage and Hallucinogenetics tour. It made me long for that kind of intervention once in a while again. It would be cool if Tim had a spot more frequently where he could just get loose and, see where the improvisation takes him. Of course, Lur was on point as well. I don't know if I'm about to say something controversial, but not a big fan of Troy. I think he was outplayed most of the night by everyone else. And there were some songs where I think he was just completely overshadowed by everyone else. Maybe it's because I'm not the biggest Queens of the Stone Age fan in the world. I don't really care about their music. But to me, it seems like Troy was the weakest link of all the musicians on stage.
Now I'm just thinking about that game show of that name. Goodbye. I don't know if that's controversial. I haven't watched or heard too much of that footage of late, at any rate. Of course, I was checking it out right after the fact. But that's been a number of months now for us, so it would be good for us to cover that one. That might be worthy of an LSD. We'll see. So thank you for that 5-star review, faithful listener, Leon 1975. Frankie, we have some miscellaneous debris as well. First, we should mention, you were talking about Tim Alexander. He has made a triumphant return to social media after an extended absence with Tim Alexander's abstract art. I believe Tim Alexander Abstract is the Instagram handle, and you can find much of his abstract art. He just actually had a show in a gallery in the Bay Area recently, Frankie. So Tim is put down one set of sticks, picked up another, and is creating visual art for us to enjoy. And abstract is definitely the word. Some of those canvases, too, make you think of Pollock, because some of them are massive.
Yeah.
So Tim is channeling different artistic inspirations between music and visual mediums. Pretty cool to see Tim Alexander Abstract on the Instagram. What do you think of those, Frankie?
Tim has tackled so many things in his life. His CV is certainly fascinating.
Yeah.
Pretty much a wandering career path. He's been all over the place. But it's like his next venture is always unpredictable. So I was pleasantly surprised by his artwork. Of course, I started following immediately, and I'm looking forward to looking at more of his paintings hopefully in the not so distant future, because he, at least to me, he seems like a pretty talented artist. I enjoyed his artwork quite a lot.
Yeah, there's method to it. It's not overly abstract, like you're looking at seemingly random brushstrokes. There's something to it. He's a thoughtful guy, so I think he's putting a lot of thought into it. And yeah, you're right. The varied things that he has done. I remember back in the early aughts, he was making metal, bending metal around to make these spectacular
doing jewelry
pieces.
trees.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And I don't know what happened to those. He was selling them for a lot of money, so as a college student, I obviously couldn't afford them. But I wonder what happened to those. But he's done a lot of different things, and it's really cool to see him with a new pursuit. Good for you, Tim.
He also gave drum lessons for a while, I think. He also worked at FedEx. He was part of Blue Man Group. And of course, the Cider. So He's been all over the place.
And of course, his musical output is so widely varied as well. We're going to get to more of his projects. One more piece of debris, Frankie, and this is for you. This is an email from Chris Taylor, who emailed us at primustrackspod@gmail.com. He said the following: in a bid to stump the deeply knowledgeable Frankie, that's probably my favorite intro to any email we've ever received. In a bid to stump the deeply knowledgeable Frankie, just wanted to let you guys know about a minor reunion of the band, this is Oysterhead, during one of the first Frog Brigade shows at Mandalay Bay Casino in 2000. Trey and Stu joined Frog Brigade for an encore playing 2 or 3 Oysterhead songs. I didn't get to see it, but having just seen Fish play that evening and also being present for a 96 Fish show, also in Vegas, where Les and Lur joined Fish on stage for Wildwood, Weed, Harpua, and Suspicious Minds, parenthetical, awesome. I was outside the show at Mandalay Bay, desperately attempting to get a scalper ticket that didn't exist, but just wanted to throw that out there for you guys since we're detailing the very few Oysterhead shows. Do you remember that, Frankie?
First of all, I feel like Eddie Trunk when people say they are going to stump me. But thank you so much for that information. It's really fascinating to think about Oysterhead and Frog Brigade successfully meeting on the same stage. I've been trying to find that audio unsuccessfully so far, but I'll keep searching. I've already gone through all the Frog Brigade shows on Toaster this year, except for the most recent ones. So if it's there, then I definitely heard it and it just flew over me. But I'll make an effort to try to find it so I can listen closely.
Taking a look at Toasterland, September 30th, 2000, Las Vegas House of Blues. There is a note that Owner of the World and Tomorrow Never Knows were with Trey Anastasio and Stuart Copeland. And then that was the encore that night. So you heard it, but it may have just gotten by you.
It didn't make an impression, but now I'll go back and listen closely.
Thank you, Chris. Great email.
And that might be the one and only time that Trey and Stuart have performed with Les outside of the Oysterhead context, right?
It's the only one I know of, and I only remember it now because Chris emailed us. So if you know of another Trey, Les, and Stu performance that's not Oysterhead, please call the hotline, the Oysterhead hotline, or email primustrackspod@gmail.com, which is more likely to get you in contact with us with that information. And you too can stump Frankie Berestein.
Please.
All right, Frankie, it's time for us to talk about Radon Balloon, track 5 from the Grand Pecking Order. This one checks in at 3 minutes and 20 seconds. And interestingly enough, this is the only track on the record in which the music and lyrics are both credited solely to Trey Anastasio. What do you got for this one?
All right. In terms of live history, Josh, it was performed at some dates of the 2001 tour. It found its way to the Bonnaroo reunion in 2006, and it was performed at both nights at the First Bank Center in Colorado. It was not performed at the 2 festival dates in the 2 subsequent years. Now, in terms of some background, let me tell you what I found about Radon Balloon. This song developed from a short acoustic instrumental performed by Trey Anastasio's band, or Trey Anastasio solo, during his 2001 tour. It apparently began as a solo acoustic number, and then developed into a full band performance with Oysterhead. Originally, it was titled Waves, though it should not be confused with a Fish song of the same name. When the song reappeared with lyrics at Red Rocks, it was retitled Radon Balloon. That's Raydawn, Radon Balloon. Yes, and would stay in rotation on Trey's set until the end of 2002, but mostly as an instrumental. Then bass and drums were added, and it became a full band performance and was retitled Radon Balloon for the Oysterhead record and subsequent tour. So the song made its first appearance with lyrics as Radon Balloon at Red Rocks, and the band would leave the stage except for Trey. He would put away his electric guitar, he would pick up his acoustic one, and he told the audience, "Can you hear that out there? I'm going to do a song I just feel like doing. This is actually going to be on the Oysterhead album that is coming out. And you're going to hear it here first. It's called Radon Balloon." Trey started to play the intro, but he stopped a few seconds to interrupt himself. Let me just say one thing. I used to play this without lyrics, and it used to be called something different, but now it is Radon Balloon, because it's on the Oysterhead album. The audience reacted positively in response, and the song was quite well received. it would also be the first official mention of any of the songs on the upcoming Oysterhead album.
Oh wow!
So,
Okay, so he was
hmm,
previewing it, teasing it for people on that Anastasio band tour.
exactly.
Okay.
So in terms of, I mean, the main differences is that the Trey composition was an acoustic number, mostly performed as an instrumental, performed with lyrics for the first time at Red Rocks. It had different titles during its development, and by the time it was incorporated as an Oysterhead number, it became a song that included chimes, bells, cowbell, and kick drum used as percussion.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, if you look at some videos of this song being performed live, even though it's a band number, you can still see how Les and Stuart sort of, take a back seat completely. They do percussion. They're there, but not really, because essentially the spotlight is on Trey while he's performing this song.
And so it's interesting to me that this is placed right next to Shadow of a Man. Given our enthusiasm for Shadow of a Man, or at least our familiarity with that kind of tune, because it's a Les Claypool tune, and now we're getting a Trey Anastasio tune where we can hear Les and Stu, but you're absolutely right. This is Trey's tune. So we're getting two ends of the spectrum, I suppose, of Oysterhead from
Yes,
these individual tracks from these guys and the other
it's a
two
great
members supporting.
it's a great transition, right? From Shadow to Radon. Um, Radon is, I mean, it's not an upbeat song. It's quite melancholic. It's a little nostalgic, but
Mm-hmm.
it's certainly more uplifting than Shadow of a Man. So it's kind of a palate cleanser before the record continues with one of its more jam-oriented numbers.
It certainly lets you take a breath and let your mind wander away from Billy's predicament from Shadow of a Man, and that is needed, I think, given especially with our conversation about that track. Holy hell, and everything that it brings with it. You need that, and so I remember wondering about the 45 seconds of ambience at the start of the track, which is funny because when Les took that idea of ambience back to Primus, I was 100% on board. But then coming back to this track, I'm going, when does this start again? And then it kicks in around 45 seconds. But I appreciate that because it does get your mind off of Shadow of a Man, which is pretty heavy stuff. So I do appreciate that. I think now more than I did before. And it's interesting. You said it was called Radon Balloon. So of course, my first thought is, oh, this song is about Tommy Chong's daughter, Radon Chong. No, it's not. Because it's called Radon Balloon and then Radon Balloon. So originally, the element radon was not a part of this tune whatsoever.
No,
Which kind of makes sense because
later edition.
the inclusion of the phrase radon balloon within the lyrics makes no damn sense to me. And hopefully you have some insight into the lyrics when we get there, Frankie, because I got nothing.
In terms of the atmospheric and the ambience that you mentioned,
Yeah.
Josh, it is true. The song does take a little bit to kick in, particularly live. It usually had kind of an extended introduction, just like Shadow of a Man. And that made me think about an interesting situation. So
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that radon is absolutely familiar territory for Phish aficionados. I imagine there must be plenty of several similar examples throughout Trey's catalog. So I imagine that it must have been easy for Phish fans to enjoy this number. And I imagine that because of the nature of Phish, it might also have been quite easy for their followers to adapt to less, right? I think if most people were not already Primus fans by the time they went to see the shows, at least they must have been able to enjoy what they were doing. But what about the other side of the coin? Can you picture many Primus fans actually enjoying this track? Because I mean, it's completely unlike what they were accustomed to up to that point, right?
100%. And this is probably the most left field track for me, even to this day, but certainly in 2001. And once again, this is around the time I was trying on Fish for size, and it didn't. It was probably the one that was the most esoteric to me, I suppose, because it was unfamiliar territory, unlike Shadow. So this would be, I'm sure, a great entry point for a Fish fan who's unfamiliar with Oysterhead and has the name recognition of Trey, much like a Primus fan who knows the name Les Claypool might glom onto Shadow. So yeah, I can see that being the case. Let's sample some portions of this tune. You identified the introduction with that finger-picking guitar.
Yes.
Trey Anastasio or James Taylor? You decide. It does sound really nice, and I'm not saying that to minimize it, but it has a nice sound. Trey's doing some nice picking there. Just from the layman's perspective, I wouldn't be able to pick up a guitar and do that right now, but I know it takes some finger dexterity and some musical knowledge to do that, and it sounds good. It's very understated, and that's what I really like about the mix here. Toby Wright did a fantastic job mixing this one. That boom and drum, I think that's one of those larger, huge rack toms like Tim Alexander probably had for Wonka and the Pork Pie kit, that one that was off to the side. I think that's what Stu's hitting there, aside from the other percussion. And it does have that big boom, but it's pushed to the back a little bit, so it's not overtaking everything, which makes sense because of this delicate guitar line. And Les has given us some flourishes, but he's definitely pushed back in the mix too. And I think part of that is that ambient sound that starts the track, I think continues all the way through. The instruments are contending with that, but it does provide more layers. I can recognize Les's playing there, and he, as you said, he's kind of taken a step back and playing a support role, but in this case, I know it's him, as opposed to when he's, say, recording with Tom Waits and playing whatever Tom tells him to play, and it doesn't necessarily sound like Les all the time. This definitely does, if that makes sense.
Yes, I agree with you.
So what do you think, Frankie, with this more understated guitar that's the foundation for this track? Is this the kind of music that you would normally seek out or listen to?
Not particularly, but I can enjoy it because, like you mentioned, it's understated, but it's intricate. So it's interesting to hear. I can appreciate from a technical point of view. It's interesting because while I enjoy more what Trey is doing on other songs, such as Pseudo Suicide, where I think his technical skill is at full display, or with the 3 guitar solos on Mr. Oysterhead, this song is certainly less compelling than those, but it is still intricate. So because the guitar is front and center, and it's what the entire song is based around or built from, it gives you the opportunity to appreciate his technique a little better. It's quite clear. And like you mentioned, it sounds like a player with a lot of confidence and dexterity. So from a technical perspective, it's something that I enjoy quite a lot. And for many years, I think the song I never disliked it, but it just kind of flew by. It was just kind of a song that was there, just another song on the album. And it clicked to me once I listened closely to the lyrics, and there was one particular line that stood out for me. I guess we'll mention that when we get to the lyrics. But because of the imagery that particular line conveyed in my mind, the song started to resonate more with me. And now I can say that while it's not one of my favorites on the record, now it's a song that I enjoy a lot more.
Let's hear one of those enjoyable parts with the refrain and bridge. This is at about 1 minute, 53 seconds.
Radon Balloon. In dreams he flies in a tiny raft in a broken sky. Radon Balloon. Saw the sun and I chose to be with the chosen one. Radon Balloon. Swung through town in a piece of twine. Radon Balloon. Disappear.
I forgot about the effect on Stewart's percussion there. That takes up about the last minute. It's a nice little effect. It's almost, it's hard to say this, but it's like easy listening almost, right? I know that's not the right term, but it feels that way almost.
Come to think about it, it is quite interesting to realize that Les had to adapt to that.
Right. This is not something that he would normally play or play on, but he is, of course, game to do it. And as he said many a time, between the three of them, they're all three alphas or big dogs. And so that's a different dynamic for him, probably different dynamic for all three of them. Of course, Stu has years of experience butting heads with Sting, so he probably has a built-in advantage. But the other, but the three of them together, they have to navigate that because they want to get along and they want to create music, and there's going to be friction. And we've heard tell of that friction through some of the anecdotes in the Grapevine book. Stewart doesn't really talk about it too much in his book. Our pal Gino was kind enough to send some scans of Stu's book in which he discussed Oysterhead. This is a case where just like with Shadow, Les said, "Hey, I got this thing. You guys do this." And Trey brought in his thing and said, "Here's what I'm thinking." And they went with it. So showing that adaptability and flexibility and musicianship as well, all three of them. So this for me, not one I would go to. And I think we're on the same page there, Frankie. This is not one I seek out. But after Shadow, I think it's placed perfectly on the record between Shadow and Armies. And it is more or less a palate cleanser. It's not a space farm, it's not Granddad's Little Ditty, but it is something to space a couple of tracks out, and it gives you something with some musicality and something that you could really dig into if you so desire. So maybe this is our bridge into Fish. Maybe.
And something that I find quite interesting, Josh, is that it's a record that has compositions. It has songs that were written by all members, but it also has compositions that come from each member individually, right? Shadow of a Man, yep. Les Claypool, Radon Balloon, Trey Anastasio. Mm-hmm. We know that also Will the Spade is mostly a Stewart track, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did the lyrics. And it does say music Oysterhead, but I'm sure it mostly came from him, given what we're hearing on that one.
Exactly. So, in that context, you would imagine that each player would be quite protective about their composition, right?
To a degree, I suppose. I guess they'd want their vision of it fulfilled, yeah.
But the fact that the two festival dates did not include either Radon Balloon, Birthday Boys, or Will the Spade, but they did include Shadow of a Man, I think it's quite interesting because it shows you that more than trying to have the spotlight and defend their compositions, it seems like they are aware of what songs really work in which environment and which ones don't. So it's a festival date. You only have a limited portion of time to make your statement. So let's go with the strongest tracks. And I guess that Trey basically realized that Radon is not a festival track, right?
You could make that argument. I suppose they wanted to play the ones that moved more. Shadow doesn't necessarily move, but
But it is quite compelling.
Yeah. And I think Les was mostly in charge of the set lists. I'm sure that they collaborated, but when it comes down to it, Les is usually the boss. So that's my take from it. I could be completely wrong, which has never happened before in the history of me, but this is my chance. Mm-hmm. Let's do this, Frankie. Do you want to hear some Primates takes on this one?
Yes, please.
If you, too, would like to participate in Primates Takes, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/Primus Tracks. Among all the tiers of support, the one common denominator is that we will read your takes on the track up for discussion right here on the podcast. Eric in Australia, a frequent contributor to Primates Takes, says simply, "This one smells very fishy." Pretty good. Continuing our global theme, Frankie, Nick in the Netherlands says, "This one is an immediate skip for me personally. I don't know why. I just can't seem to get through it." Appreciate your honesty there, Nick. Nick's pretty open-minded when it comes to all kinds of music. This one just doesn't work for him. Now, our resident fishhead, Jordan Kahn, Frankie, the original instrumental version on Trey's self-titled album is cousins with the in-law Josie Wells from Farmhouse. Both strong albums, with these tracks providing palate cleansers. There's that term again. As this one does for Grand Pecking Order. I'm glad Trey oysterized it so we can drift and reflect before resuming the oral assault. Drift and reflect. Sounds like a balloon. Thank you, Jordan. Those are our Primates takes for Radon Balloon. Now, Frankie, do you have insight on the lyrics to this one?
No, I just have like a very general idea what the song is about. I guess it's just kind of this observation about a balloon drifting along different places and kind of the nostalgia that it conveys, right? Not ever settling down in a particular place, just drifting, coming and going. From an island to the Tetons, maybe you can fill that in. Does that refer like to branches? Is he talking about trees, or is he talking about tectonic plates?
Oh, the Tetons. That's a mountain range in North America, Montana, the Grand Tetons?
Yes.
Yeah.
A step toward the craters on the surface of the moon. Is that like an allegory of how far the balloon could go?
Given that the Tetons are in Montana, and there's also a national monument called Craters of the Moon. I believe it's in Idaho. I've been there.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for explaining that.
I do wonder if there's a theme there, if he's kind of sticking to these Northwest landmarks. I could be completely wrong, but that's what comes to mind for me, given that we were in the Teton Mountains just now. So there could be a connection there.
In dreams, he flies a tiny raft in a broken sky. That's my favorite line. That's the line that sold the track for me. So prior to that one, I think only the refrain kind of stuck in my mind, and that's how I remember the song. But when I really paid attention to the lyrics and I heard that one, the song clicked. I think it's a really beautiful line. I think it's perhaps one of the best lyrics on the album. I mean, just that phrase in particular, it's really evocative.
Looking at these lyrics again, this one actually has a kind of a dreamy quality, like Little Faces. So I do wonder if it's just about this person's dream life and what they do, or just somebody daydreaming and letting their mind wander to these places. It could be that simple.
So the switch from the general description of the overview of the different spots where the balloon is drifting along, and then the switch to he for that verse. So do you think Trey is actually singing about a person rather than an object?
I suppose so. Maybe it's somebody in a balloon that, like a hot air balloon, but
Oh, interesting.
could be. I don't know. The radon thing throws me off, but if it's Ray Dawn balloon, then all bets are off. Anything can happen there. So they're quite opaque, these lyrics. It's kind of hard to see what they mean or see through them to some kind of meaning. So that's where I've always stopped with it, because they just don't feel as accessible as some of the other lyrics, especially coming from the world of Claypool, where he normally lays it out there for you. There might be a few mysterious things, but for the most part, you know what he's writing and singing about. But this is a bit more hard to get into as far as that goes. But it could be. Once again, it's very dreamy and does have that floating, reflecting, and drifting quality that our pal Jordan Kahn mentioned. So
it's an ethereal song, absolutely.
Ethereal, yeah. And it does inspire me to say, please have your home checked for radon. It is a radioactive gas that can eventually give you cancer if you are breathing it in regularly and it gets stuck in your lungs. But the good news is, Frankie, if you don't have a basement in your home and you don't hang out in basements, you're probably going to be fine, because it's naturally occurring in the surface of the earth. So I remember I remember radon test ads back in the Midwest when I was young, Frankie. I don't know if that's something you hear, public service announcements in Mexico City about that, but just something that jogged my memory. How about a couple live cuts?
Let's check them out.
We're going back to Colorado, Frankie. Valentine's Day 2020.
So I just wanted to say that I don't know if listeners are wondering why we are sticking to the soundboards, considering these songs were played extensively in other tours. The reason is that most of those audience recordings they are listenable, but they are quite rough compared to these recordings. And we want to offer the best quality possible for you. So that's why we're sticking to the soundboards of the most recent performances instead of sampling audience recordings from the 2001 tour or Bonnaroo.
What a gentleman. Let's hear the intro to this one, Valentine's Day 2020. Stu's having a ball back there. That's quite pleasant. Once again, not my go-to type of music, but with every once in a while, that's the kind of stuff I want to hear. So that I think that would fit in, and I kind of like that live performance. It has a bit of a different vibe to it. So, I would say
that no live Oysterhead performance will ever be like the record. They always speed it up, slow it down, stretch it out. It's always going to be different.
Yeah. Let's forward to what Frankie calls a nasal radon. And once again, you don't want nasal radon. You don't want to breathe it in. We're just talking about the quality of what I hope is the pronunciation. Was that it, Frankie?
Yeah.
Rain on. That was up there, but way up in that nose. Rain on. Thank you for that. Let's go to the next night, February 15th, 2020. Still in Colorado. This one we're going to hear... be good. This one we're going to hear some percussion.
Day that came before. Drifting is a simple thing to do.
Stu, of course, a precision player, so he's laying it down, and you're hearing exactly what he wants you to hear. That's pretty cool. Thanks for those selections, Frankie. I think I have a new appreciation for Radon Balloon.
I'm glad you enjoy them. So you're starting to come around to the record slowly.
I am coming back around. It's been a long time since I've listened to it for pleasure. And really listening to it for these purposes, I think I'm rediscovering the parts that I really enjoyed 20-odd years ago when I first heard it. So it's always nice to revisit it and be happy with revisiting a record. I guess I can say this, Frankie, and I've been hinting at it for a while now. Radon Balloon, you're odorless, you're tasteless. We need a test for you, and you've been tracked. Next time, Frankie, what is going on with the Army?
Let's read all about it in USA Today, Josh.
Nicely done. Once again, we are at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Threads. PrimusTracksPod@gmail.com is the email address. Frankie's Facebook page is a nice place to go, too. One of these days, he'll let me have access to posting on it. You never know.
Oh, we've tried multiple times.
I don't think we can make it work. Yeah. I'll just get in the balloon and drift away. Later days.
Willie Mays.